Video. Right. On.
Talking about the challenge opportunities that the COVID-19 has brought forward, not just to India, but globally as well. So on behalf of the Nehru Science Center, the National Council of Science Museum, Ministry of Culture, Government of India, it gives me great pleasure to welcome 5 distinguished panelists who will be sharing their thoughts on this important subject. At the outset, we have with us Sri Ranjit Singh Deolji. He is the Managing Director of all important Metro Rail, that too Metro Line 3, which incidentally happens to pass through our area. So we'll be having the Science Museum metro stop with all the difficulties once it is over. I'm sure in 2021 or 22, all the distinguished audience to the Nehru Science Center will be able to use the Metro Rail, sir. And incidentally, just about a year back, we had a small little exhibition on the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation, particularly highlighting on the Metro Rail 3, which is passing through our area. And because that is almost all except one station comes under the ground. So this is the only line which almost all stations are there underground. So we are extremely happy that you are here with us, sir.
Thank you very much.
We have with us Dr. Lagdawala. I think the Delhi, the largest COVID hospital, is now in the news. Everybody is talking about Delhi, the largest COVID hospital, which is going to house about 1,000 or 2,000 to 1,500 beds. But the first concept of starting a massive hospital kind of a thing, or a isolation ward kind of a thing in a public place, was actually envisaged by the Mumbai Municipal Corporation under the able guidance and leadership of Dr. Lagdawala. And so you have that immense pleasure, or maybe an honor, to have handled close to about 600 odd patients in the National Sports Complex of India, just adjacent to the Worli area where we are. Incidentally, I'm sure you are aware, sir. I mean, you also came for the inspection of the Nehru Science Center. Here too, in our campus, since the Nehru Science Center is locked down, we have created the Bombay Municipal Corporation has created a small isolation ward with about 115, 120 beds. So if the health infrastructure is found wanting, perhaps all these facilities will come in handy. I'm sure you will have a lot of things to share with us. We have with us the Vice Chancellor of the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences, Dr. Maisekar, Dilip Maisekar, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a new norm.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All education departments will have a new norm to bear with, whether it is exams, lectures. I'm sure you will have your experiences to share with all of us how the new norm is going to shape up the education industry. We have with us Dr. Mahesh Lalwani ji. So you work with the Jaslok Hospital, and you had close to more than 3 decades of experience. I'm sure you will have a lot to share with us. I mean, as to how, I mean, whether it is stigma or the depression, the stress that everybody is going through, how do they cope up with that? How do we live with the COVID situation and going beyond? And last but not the least, we have with us Dr. Sonali Khanna, who is the faculty member of the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. And she's also the Vice President and former Treasurer, Executive Committee member of the Indian Academy of the Oral Medicine and Radiology. She's the one actually who is brain behind all this thing. She's the one actually who has talked to each one of you, each one of us, to try and see what we can do from our side. Sir, I will start with our own example of the Nehru Science Center. Like the whole of the nation, we too were locked down in the month of March. The Nehru Science Center is a museum for the public, particularly for students. But then once the lockdown came into effect, in the larger health interest of the nation and all of us, the citizens, we too had to close our doors for our audience. Initially, for about 10-15 days, we were really lost as to what do we do, how do we ensure that we continue to remain connected with our audience. So what we did is, can we try some online events? It was completely new for us. We started with some online events. Now, if you really look at the social medias that we handle, we are extremely very well connected with our audience. Just a couple of days back, when we had the solar eclipse, the partial solar eclipse, the annular eclipse, which covered India. So we were very happy to inform you that about 285,000 people have seen the live feed from the Nehru Science Center. The challenge that we had was that, our doors are closed for our audience. But then the opportunity was that we have the digital media with which we are connected now. This digital media, using this media, we tried to connect with our audience. And fortunately for us, people started accepting this. We are doing workshops, we are doing lectures. We are doing the panel discussion. We had Dr. Anil Kakodkar, we had the chief of the NASSCOM, Ms. Debjani Ghosh, talking about the opportunities, what the digital opportunities will bring about. So several such eminent people have spoken from this lockdown series. So it's a great honor that we will now be having this panel discussion. So I will start with Dr. Sonali Khanna. You can speak about what we intend to do with this, and then gradually we go on to the other esteemed panelists. Thank you again for joining us, sir. On behalf of the Nehru Science Center, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be a part of this. Thank you.
Good evening to all the listeners. Thank you, Mr. Khener. We are indeed grateful to Nehru Science Center for convening this panel discussion on a burning topic of the day. If we succeed in lighting a spark somewhere, we would have served our purpose. The dawn of 2020 was welcomed with a lot of gusto, as each new calendar year is welcomed. And we all hoped and prayed that this new year will bring a lot of peace and prosperity to all human beings. However, in less than 20 days, it had dawned upon the world that 2020 was a totally different year. There is a gloom all over that the incurable COVID-19 is taking lives of the rich and poor alike. Further, it is not discriminating on the basis of region, religion, race, or gender. Moreover, the World Health Organization predicts that the worst is yet to come as the economic growth melts and now the distress signals become alarming. But as professionals and intellectuals, we cannot give up and should look for hitherto unknown opportunities and fully utilize them for the benefit not only of the patients but also for economic growth. And we also need to be financially sustainable. So we cannot afford to look back in despair. The Honorable Prime Minister of India has resolved to strengthen the public health infrastructure. It not only means installation of few ventilators, addition of bed strength in selected hospitals, or maybe deployment of few more doctors in bigger hospitals, or improvement of testing laboratories. What it really means is that we need to cover the rural areas as well. So areas where the marginalized sections of society live. So old age homes, homes for the differently abled persons, and orphanages need to be taken care of. We have to target not only metros and urban areas, but worry about smaller cities and towns. At the grassroots level, we need to worry today about primary healthcare centers as well. So, a very sustainable and a long-term strategy needs to be evolved with emphasis on the economy, as we all know that finance is a very major constraint. We have to cover tribal areas and the marginalized echelons of society, the differently abled people, and the elderly population, which is our priority. Remote areas, hilly areas need to be taken care of. In primary healthcare centers, trained workforce, that is medical, paramedical staff, and healthcare workers need to be reinforced. Their link up with testing facilities, be it government or private, have to be worked out. It has to be a well thought of systematic area coverage plan so that no area is left uncovered. And frankly, it's important that we do not leave any area unnoticed or undetected. It is advisable to map the facilities all over the country, and the first priority should be to intensify the coverage, that is, to increase the bed strength and the number of pathology laboratories and blood banks, particularly in remote areas of the country, where the corporates fail to reach. So we should appreciate that even after the end of this pandemic, epidemics will continue to occur, and the public health institutions must be in a position to counter such challenges. Now, in emergencies, it is possible to transport medical and paramedical personnel, but facilities cannot be created overnight. And in my humble view, this has been the most serious challenge of 2020 and should be converted into an opportunity. Therefore, infrastructural expansion, its optimum utilization, and the functional challenges should be our focus today. So now we are in for a long haul, and we are seeing a big spurt of cases in cities like Mumbai. Even Chennai, Guwahati, Bengaluru are all there. The lockdown has been reinforced. In fact, today also we see that it's more strictly reinforced in varying measures. So the situation continues to be grim, though being managed fairly effectively by the concerned authorities. It also means that the provisions of the Disaster Management Act 2005, Epidemic Diseases Act 1897, and the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973 and other relevant guidelines and procedures will remain in force. In the last 100 days, we have seen guidelines which are prescribed by the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, on lockdown-related issues, and by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in medical and public health aspects of the management and the control of COVID. But as public health professionals, we can see that there is no comfort as yet, and that we have to live with restrictions. So it becomes imperative that people continue to wear multi-layered masks, maintain adequate hygiene, and physical distancing of at least 6 feet with utmost caution. Special care has to be taken for the children below 10 years of age and the population above 60 years of age, as they are very vulnerable. An attempt has to be made to boost our immunity, lung health, and focus on good mental health, which is a major concern today. Thank you.
So, I'll next come to you, sir, Dr. Lagdawala, because Mumbai was the first city in India which started because lots of people coming from expats coming to Mumbai. We had lots of cases, and initially, it was appearing as if it's beyond the control. It was really challenging for the health infrastructure of Mumbai. But then the way the Mumbai has bounced back, for example, our own area, the Worli area, where we had our neighboring area in Jijamata, or for that matter, we have other areas which are highly densely populated. More or less, these things have come out of the containment zone, and that has been primarily possible because the improving the health infrastructure, you play a major role, particularly the national. Apparently, hearing that we are about 5+ COVID cases.
Sir, there is a problem in communication, please. Yeah.
Okay, it looks like my net is out down. So you can, एक काम करो. तो डॉक्टर सुनो,
Should
मेरा
I
नेट डाउन है,
request?
सोनाली को स्टार्ट करने के लिए बोल.
Yes. Should
You can
I
start because I
request?
think my net is. Yeah.
Should I request Dr. Lakrawala sir to please explain us how you came up with the whole organization and the management of NSCI containment zone, and how you have actually introduced a lot of technological advances to facilitate that, including a lot of things of AI related things that you've been using, and that's really helped you do that in a very efficient way. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sonali, and hello to everybody. Glad to see that everyone's fine and safe and at home. So this whole journey started way back when the first lockdown was announced by our Honorable Prime Minister. I was sitting at home playing football with my son, and I was feeling very restless because this was a war. This is the war that our generation has seen for the first time, probably, and probably we might never see this again. But the entire world is locked down by a virus that could be very easily killed with soap water, but unfortunately, lots of people were dying because of it. Being a doctor, I felt that our job was to be on the front line, just like probably the police officers, like the municipal officers, all who probably didn't have a choice but to be out over there. A lot of doctors have the choice. A lot of them have stayed at home, but I believe that the best place they had was to be out there trying to save lives. And that's how I ventured out. So initially I started with trying to help out migrants and trying to see whether I could do something for them. Eventually I moved on to what I do best, and that was to set up a facility at Podar Ayurvedic Hospital to try an isolation facility. We set up a 150-bed isolation facility to start with out over there. I had no help. So initially I had, I asked for volunteers because no one came out and really helped me. It was quite funny because I didn't have the infrastructure, the money, the power behind me. So the municipal commissioner there, Mr. Sharad Ugre, asked me that I would like to help out. And I thought I'd say yes. I thought a lot of hospitals would come and back me, but I was foolish enough to think that they would come, and eventually I had to run it on my own. So I volunteered. I asked for some volunteers. I had one surgeon who backed me, one intern, and 4 physiotherapists. So we had a group of 7 people, all volunteers. And then I had 24 nurses, luckily, who came and supported me, and they were all trainee nurses. So they were all 4th-year nursing students. And that's how we started. So initially, there were 2 ideals. I wanted to save lives of those with corona. I wanted to take away the stigmatization that they were facing in the early days of corona, where the moment you were declared a corona positive patient, sirens would blare, BMC would come in, they would lock down the entire facility. Everyone would think you were the criminal at large. And it was very dramatic. It was all movie style. I wanted to take that aspect away and go and out and tell people that you could hug them even when they were there. And it was not the be all and end all of life if you got corona. Okay. The other thing was to completely protect my healthcare professionals. I had promised them at home that I'd come back alive. And I made sure that if anyone out of the 32 people who were 31 people who were working for me were to get infected, I would be the first one to get infected. Okay, that was my promise to them. So I put very, very stringent standards to try and control this. So the first thing we did was we used very good quality PPE, the mask, and everything. But I thought of using something like a contactless clinic model, and that's how I started using the first technology, because managing 150 patients with having only 2 doctors was not going to be very easy. So I brought about the contactless clinic model, and soon enough that model hit out. So then I was asked by the municipal commissioner, would I think in terms of having a look at NSCI Dome? When I first saw NSCI Dome, I had just remembered going for rock concerts and stuff like that out over there. And when I saw it, I was given 5 days to convert it into a facility because the numbers of cases in Worli were rapidly rising. We had Janta Colony, we had Worli Kolivada, that was rapidly rising. There was a lot of testing being done here. And then they told me whether I could take over. So I took over that facility. Again, we used contactless clinic. We divided into 4 areas. One was for ladies, one was for older people, one was for families, and one was for the gents. And we used a lot of oxygen cylinders. So at that point of time, we had 150 oxygen cylinders. I used 2 basic concepts. One was I used the cameras that were already installed in NSCI for good effect. So I used these cameras because they were very high, powerful cameras to zoom into every patient. So with those cameras, I could zoom into the every patient's finger if someone was on oxygen and monitor his oxygen saturation levels. All right, so we started getting good results with that. We built these contactless clinics. So initially, patients thought I was completely mad because why would a doctor not be able to come and see a patient? So I told them that this war cannot be fought. For the first few days in Podar as well as in NSCI, for 10 hours, I had gone in with my hazmat suits. Wearing that, I used to sweat a lot. It was almost like being in a sauna center. Okay, you would come out completely drenched to the core. You couldn't see anything because your masks and face would completely fog up. It was not very easy. And because of that, I give it to the doctors, the nurses, all credit to them, because you can't really answer someone carefully, right? You get irritated because you are yourself not comfortable. Whereas from a contactless clinic model, you would sit in the confines of an AC room. Patients would come. If they took 15, 20 minutes, they would still be able to talk to you comfortably. You would be able to answer all their queries. And that became a habit. In the morning, they would come take their medicines and go away. The next thing I used from Podar was AI, like Sonali said. I use artificial intelligence with X-rays. Now, it was very difficult to get swabbing done in the early days because we just didn't have enough of samples to get everybody swabbed. How do I isolate those who are high suspects? So I started using X-ray. X-ray image were put onto a cloud. With the help of AI, we could monitor whether they were high, medium, low. And then our expert radiologists looked at these images and classified them. So from 100 images, let's say we got 30 images that were classified as high and medium. And an expert radiologist eventually whittled them down to around 10 images. And those 10 patients were isolated. And that's how jumped down very rapidly. Now, like I told you before, that we had for staff, so I had to use these techniques. The other model we used to do to save lives was two simple things. I did not use any retroviral drugs. I didn't use ivermectin or anything of that sort. I did two things. With the help of serial X-rays, if I saw an X-ray deteriorating from 4th day to 5th day or 8th day, we did 4th day, 8th day, and 14th day. If an X-ray deteriorated from the 4th to 8th day, I put the patient on oxygen way before his saturation started dropping. So before he reached a happy hypoxia stage, I put them on oxygen. And somehow, I believe we managed to save a lot of lives there. The other thing is we took all patients. We were the first ones to tie up with Tata Hospital and take all cancer patients. With the help of Nita Varti madam, we took all pregnant ladies. So we took them all. We were not a CCC2 facility at all. And the other thing we did was that all old patients were put on low molecular weight heparin. I believe the two causes of death in COVID are lack of oxygen and microthrombosis. You prevent these two, you might be able to save a lot of lives. Like we've now treated around 1,600 patients in total at NSCI Dome, out of which we've discharged close to 1,300, making it a 74% or 75% discharge rate. Across all, the oldest patient we've discharged is 94 years of age. We've discharged close to 200 patients above 60 years of age. We've discharged diabetics, hypertensives, all comorbidities. We've discharged close to 160 cancer patients already. We've discharged all our pregnant patients. And all this with not one healthcare professional getting infected. So we've had a 0% infectivity rate so far. And that's something I think I'm more proud of than the number of people we've discharged or our discharge rate. The other thing we started was ICUs, because we soon realized we were losing patients in between hospitals. Okay, so we've treated a diamond merchant here. We've treated someone who could afford a suite class in something by creating a concept called as holding cell. We were the first guys in Bombay to create a holding cell, which would take in positive or negative patients. At one point in Bombay, when we struggled, we had either positive. They used to take either positive patients or negative patients. If you were in the middle, nobody was ready to take you. And they were looking for ventilators, oxygen. The big mistake that a lot of people made and lost their lives, I believe, was because they kept looking for ventilators. A lot of them would have done very well with just oxygen therapy, but they were made to believe you need a ventilator to survive. And we all do know now that world across that our mortality rates with someone who was ventilated early would be as high as 86%, including the best infrastructure in America and wherever else in the world. So that is one thing. And now we've got our containers. So we took shipping containers, which were 20 feet by 12 feet wide, and converted them into
500 people a day. But now it is 250,000 people per day. So there are lots of things that the government also has done. creating the infrastructure. I'm sure you'll be able to throw more light on what, from the governmental point of view, be it the Bombay Municipal Corporation, the state government, the central government. So Ranjit Singh ji, not just from the Mumbai, the metro point of view, perhaps maybe you can throw more light on the governmental initiatives that has happened in these times of lockdown. Sir, Ranjit Singh ji.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yeah, as Dr. Lakdawala has that was a very fascinating work which he has done. From MMRC side, we are also building based on the same lines as in Dome. We are also building a COVID hospital at Dahisar with 950 bedded hospital plus 110 bedded ICU unit, and 70% of the bedded hospital will be oxygenated. I am not a doctor, so I will be just diverting to the other issues. As am I audible? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. So I will be discussing some other issues. Initially, Mr. Kenneth has told me about the Science Museum. Yes, we are looking forward that that area we should be able to serve the Science Museum as soon as possible with the metro service. But it all depends how we learn to live with this coronavirus, and how the labor comes back, and how quickly we can pick up the speed as it was before the COVID. As Dr. Sonali has already said, that these disasters are generally, they affects the poorest the most. Even the more vulnerable sections of the society, like children, elderly, differently abled, third gender, homeless, street vendors, everyone laborers was the main problem. All those were impacted a lot, both financially as well as psychologically. I think we have to reach out to them. Even this webinar can also be a media to reach out to them and try to build the confidence within them, and to provide information regarding the enhancing their earnings post-COVID. I think we need to do that, and government is definitely taking different measures as announced by the government from time to time. But I think the pandemic is going to change the lifestyle in most of us, whether we are at home or in office or at any public place. Hygiene is going to be the new normal now, as there is a saying that we are as strong as the weakest link. So when we are saying hygiene, that means hygiene of everyone. The whole strata of the society should be equally, they should maintain some basic hygiene standards. Only then we can be safe. The employers can have to look after their employees in a much better way, so that they should work in a more hygienic places. So I think there is going to be, with this, there can be loss of some jobs, but there will be definitely much more opportunities that may develop and create lots of more jobs in our society. And I think one need to keep a track of this paradigm shift, how the jobs are shifting from one area to the other areas. As Dr. Lakdawala was explaining, how AI is helping the doctors to handle so many patients simultaneously, while otherwise you would have needed so many doctors to handle such a big facility. So AI is one area which is which will develop fast. It was already developing, but it will not develop very fast. You know, during this period, people will generally try to be more self-reliant, whether at home or at office, at any place. Even the Atmanirbhar mission, which will also try to change the consumption pattern in our society. I will just go from a lower strata, from the point of view of lower strata of the society. Like we may be needing less domestic help. You know, people will be like to do their work on their own. Maybe in the office also. Maybe you want there will be change in pattern how you take tea or the snacks in the office. So there may be some losses in the job, but there may be some areas where the jobs will increase a lot, like e-commerce, delivery boys. Then when you have to maintain a better hygiene in the office or the public place, the more people will be required for better sanitization, and even in the hospitals as and we need to strengthen the public health system. So there also there will be lots of more job opportunities, and more job opportunities will be there in the manufacturing sector, because once you are self-reliant, then there will be reliance on the machines. So at home or at office, you will need a washing machine. You need to have a dryer. You need to have a vacuum, more vacuum machines, and maybe more dishwashers. All these things will be required, which will boost up the manufacturing sector. And even in the public place, to maintain the higher sanitization standards, you will need mechanization. So all these things will there will be more demand for electricity. So in electricity requirement also will create, I think, more job opportunities. Even to maintain these facilities and to run these facilities and to service these machines, you will need more jobs, more people to work on. I think there will be a shift from the traditional way we are working to there will be a shift from this way to the other way. So we have to keep a track on that. Even Nirbhar country, that mission also will lead to lots of manufacturing which will start locally. Even in our metro, the high technology and heavy machinery, some of people have started manufacturing these things in India already, because like all the coaches will be, although it's a French firm, but with the local collaboration, we are manufacturing in Sri City near Chennai in Andhra Pradesh. So these kind of other activities are coming up, which they will start manufacturing in India. I think there also there will be lots of opportunities, job opportunities, which will be created. So I think the world will change for a better, I think, for a betterment of the human being. Only thing that the need is that we need to skill ourselves and also to be ready for such opportunities so that we don't miss the bus. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. How the job opportunities will definitely be created in the near future once the COVID subsides. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ranjit ji. Thanks a lot. You're absolutely right that these challenges do bring about opportunities as well. One of the greatest opportunity I think that which can be visibly seen is see the PPE number of kits that PPE that people are producing now, or for that matter the COVID testing RT-PCR thing that 50 lakh 2.5 lakh tests per day. So there are people who are actually taking this challenges, converting them into opportunities. So I think to talk about this and also to talk about in general how the private medical colleges are also joining hand in hand with the governmental facilities. We have with us Dr. Mahesh Lalwani ji. So I think you can actually share with us how the private medical infrastructure, not just in Mumbai, all over the country, how they have taken this challenge to convert that into an opportunity and then join hands with the government to serve the society. Dr. Lalwani.
Good evening to everybody. In the beginning, I first want to start with a positive note that even this will pass. Okay? We went through the Spanish flu in the early 1920s, 1918 to 1920, in which more than 500 million people were infected. Everybody thought at that time that was the end of the world, but it only taught us how to take care of other pandemics. After that, we've gone through things like AIDS. AIDS was another scare in the 1980s, where everybody thought, now how will we go ahead? How will we practice? How will we live? We went through that. After that, we had the SARS, H1N1, MERS. Now we have come out with COVID. And I'm sure that we'll come out with this successfully. But what this has done, it has changed our way of looking and treating patients. The whole protocol has changed. I remember in the 70s when we used to work gloves were a thing of, we never even thought of using gloves. When you went for an injection, you went to a doctor, he took out a needle from a sterilizer and gave you an injection. There was no disposable, there was no nothing. Now, after AIDS came out, then we started using disposable needles. Things started getting better and better. We started using gloves, masks, sterilization improved, everything improved slowly. Now, when a patient comes to a clinic or when a patient comes to our offices, we are practically dressed up like spacemen. As Dr. Lakrawala said, we wear this hazmat suit, we have air filters, air purifiers, all kinds of sanitation things. We have protocols that patients have to follow before they enter in the clinic, in the waiting room, when you're doing a procedure, after they leave. So the whole protocol, the whole thing has changed. Going to the future, all that has changed. Now, I'm being a dentist, what we are most worried about is the asymptomatic. Now, most people, think of COVID as that you're going to have fever, cold, cough, and things like that, and you're going to come to us. Fortunately or unfortunately, in our practice, we don't see too many symptomatic patients, because if they're symptomatic, they would rather go to Dr. Lakrawala where they will be treated. But what we have to treat are the 85% of the patients who have no symptoms. You see, that is the bigger fear, because the asymptomatic patients are the ones who are spreading it more. Because the minute you have a symptom, if you're proved to be positive, you are isolated, you're put in treatment. But the asymptomatic patients are the ones that we have to be most scared of. Now, in the asymptomatic, you may be totally asymptomatic where you have no symptoms, you have nothing, but you're still shedding the virus. Second thing under that classification is you may be pre-symptomatic. That is actually the most infective stage, where it is just before you start getting the infection, the symptoms. That period is the way where you're shedding the most viruses and you're most infective. And then you have the post-symptomatic, where you may have a very mild symptom. You might have just a runny nose or just a very mild sore throat. It's not a definitive thing. So you feel it is not infective, you think, and if you go for a test, you might turn out to be positive. You see, now the incubation period in this disease, they found to be between 3 to 14 days. Okay, but the symptomatic part, you normally get on the 4th or 5th day, you turn to be symptomatic. But the time just before you get symptomatic is the most dangerous part, because that's when you're shedding the virus the most. But you may be symptomatic you may be symptomatic for a longer time. Now, patients who are 60 and above, patients who got comorbidity, they're the ones you've got to be most scared of. You see, now that is unfortunately, right now we have no vaccine, though we're working on it. The treatments for it is more empirical. See, but the only main thing is is a prevention. Now, this virus, unfortunately, spreads through a simple thing like coughing, sneezing, and even talking. Now, one doesn't realize how important wearing a mask is, because even when you talk, you're giving out droplets, you're giving out an aerosol. Now, this infection ideally resides in the mouth, in the nose, in the throat. You see, though it's mainly a lower respiratory tract infection, but the mouth, the salivary glands are the place where you have a lot of these viruses teeming. Now, they affect the ACE2 inhibitors in the mucous membrane of the nose and the mouth. That's how it spreads. Now, fortunately, the skin of your body, your hands, your body, that's not the place where the virus penetrates. Your virus penetrates through the lips and your nose. So if you wear a mask, that prevents the spread of it to an extent. But it's very, very important that everybody wears the mask, because it's not the patient. If hypothetically, if I had COVID, if I wear a mask, if the chance of transmission comes down by about 70%. While if I didn't have it and I wear a mask, chance of me getting is about 10%. But if both parties wear a mask, okay, the chance of transmission come down to 1.5%. So it's very, very essential that you wear a mask. And one doesn't realize how important it is, because even talking, a simple thing like talking, can transmit it without realizing. That is why social distancing of 2 meters or 6 feet is very, very essential, because fortunately this virus is a little bigger in size, and it latches onto the droplets, and that tends to descend and come down because of gravity. Okay, so if you're at a 6 feet distance, you're reasonably safe. And the reason for hand washing is because your hands tend to touch contaminated surfaces, your hands, and then you tend to touch your face, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, you rub your eyes. That's from where then the virus gets into your body and infects the person. Okay, so it is very, very essential that we maintain all these things. That is the only thing, because right now there is no cure per se. It is empirical. There is no virus. There is no vaccine. Once that comes out, then the whole, it won't be such a pandemic. It won't affect the whole world, because right now it is very, very infected. That's what we've got to be careful of, because out of the 100 patients who get COVID, only 15 will be symptomatic. 85 are asymptomatic, and out of the 15 who are symptomatic, 5 will get into the hospital, and out of the 5, you'll have 2 which will land up in the ICU, and unfortunately, the mortality in the ICU is very, very high, because once it goes to the lower respiratory tract, the lungs, once those get infected, then it becomes a major problem. You see? Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. One of the new challenges that the COVID has brought is in the sector of education, particularly the students. The students are the worst affected. They have that stress regarding what the exams are going to be. And we have with us the Vice Chancellor of the Maharashtra University of Health Sciences. Sir, I'm sure this is a great challenge for you, because what do we do? I mean, for example, you need to produce doctors to handle this pandemic, whereas, we're locked out, and how do you take classes? How do you, but education is one department where there have been outstanding opportunities have been availed, and lots of everybody is almost using the digital facilities, digital platform to connect with the students, and lots of classes, everything from school to colleges, everybody is adopting this new technology or the new norm. So what do you say about this? What the challenges were, and what the opportunity for the education sector?
Good evening, everyone. Shri Devalji, Shri Dr. Lakdawalaji, Dr. Lalwani, Ken sir, and Sunali. See, basically, the pre-COVID and the post-COVID, the life is, with COVID is changed. Now, post-COVID will later when the treatment will be available. So it is now pre and with COVID only. That's all. The pre-COVID, we did that. When the colleges, when we started in medical colleges or the university, everywhere. For us, because everyone is treating separately, they said all doctors, students, they are going to be in a COVID, and they are bound to, even they pass also, they are going to be in COVID, and they are going to be trained in COVID. But the perception with the student is that because we too have also experiencing this for the first time in our life. Because see, I being a pulmonary physician, I studied from KM Hospital, Mumbai in 1989. That time, I will tell you, getting our thesis type, we have to move here and there. That time, there was not a Xerox facility was also available. Now the total scenario has been changed. And now it is realized that with COVID, we have come to every type of all doctors and engineers, they have come together. Initially, they were at the different stages. Now it cannot be without engineering, without technology, and without electronics. Now we are just because you just said about that, what about the terms of examination? You are hearing a lot of things from everywhere. University is governed by the central council, because being a professional university. We cannot give a nod to the examination because it is we have to follow the guidelines of the government of India. That is by act parliamentary that the councils have been formed. Dental council, medical council, Ayush, then this covers the homeopathy and the Ayurveda and the nursing council. See, what are their guidelines are there? We have to follow it, and we have to conduct the university is the only conducting body examination and controlling all the academic part of the student. First, I will tell you what about the academic part. What has happened, those were in the session of this summer, pre-summer almost, they were at the end of the academic session of the current year. But their proposed next sessions are already awaited. So what to do for that? So now we started them for getting e-learning, available of the website, availability of the lectures online. Students, they are tuned up for that. But the only problem is that the availability of the site to everyone, because you know that the almost 25% students still comes from the rural area. Because of this COVID pandemic, being a sudden panic, they went to their rural area. How to contact them, how to gain them, this we have to sort it out from the local colleges. We have never given vacation to any college, because the government notification itself says that all medical, any faculty, they are not to be given vacation because they are going to be in a COVID. You know that already the government, Honorable Prime Minister also has appealed that everyone has to be in a COVID, including ASHA workers who are taking home guard. Then why not the paramedical as a doctor student? Those are from the professional courses. So it was like that when this COVID started in the March, lockdown started 15th March, students had too much panicity. People are also panic. We too also, because we were not knowing how is the presentation, how is it going to be, and how toxic it is going to be, and how much virus is going to be virulence. I, being a pulmonary physician, I had worked in completely for last 30 years as a professor in medicine in pulmonology at Government Medical College. I saw swine flu, I saw the SARI, then all these we have seen, but we never find that this was so much contagious. And these things have to be complete to get confirmed to the common man also and to the student. It took time. Now you know what the graph initially was. They were very much cautious about the COVID. The graph was almost 80-85%. Now they are just not bothered about it, the 15%, and the COVID infection chances are getting more. The only part of is that what we have made for the student is that online teaching we have started, online seminar we have started, online interaction we have started. We are given through the YouTube, whatever the way we have supported the student for the academic purposes, whichever facility they can available. And we saw to it that these students, those are already having, because now everyone almost is having mobile and Android mobile with them. And the students, they are more techno-savvy than us also. You know that because in our house also, our children, our grandchildren, they are more techno-savvy than us, and they are almost 24/7 on mobile. So we are providing them the links also. They are getting the links from various websites. They are getting all complete their lectures and everything. But ultimately, the class teaching you cannot avoid. That years together you are empowered, and it is going together on that. So it is very difficult. But the only part is that up till now we were attending the conference at various places, like in Mumbai, Calcutta, Delhi. But now the webinars, they have been started by the various pharmaceuticals, all the doctors association. Now students, they are getting interacting with it. The future era after COVID will be like that, or during COVID this period. Now everyone will try to see that it is available at your home, at your leisure, on your computer, and at your comfort. I just tell you that one of the conference, which is the British Respiratory General Conference, is always in August, September. They always used to invite everyone in the London for the conference. This time they said that we'll give conference of 4 days on online. Make a registration, online registration for conference for every faculty. So that's why now the faculty, and they have given a lot of concession into that. So the now students, they all are registering for it. Now the question is coming about the postgraduate doctor, those are working in the hospital. Because they are those candidates, those doctors who have taken registration for MD, MS, all of them are in a COVID duty. You know, in KEM, Mumbai, JJ, government hospitals, everywhere, all affiliated colleges, those all students are in the COVID duties, and 8 hourly minimum they are doing daily duty. But you know, after 8 hour duty, they get too much stress for that. And those are the appearing batches, because there are 3 batches of them. First, second, third, which is the appearing one. The third, they are waiting for the examination to take place. So they are still doing today till today, because just now we got a not clearance from the Chancellor, Honorable Chancellor, Honorable Government for getting the examination. Now, question of examination different because now getting patient, online examination, we are thinking in every part, online evaluation of the patient. Then we call it as a stimulation lab, where the models are kept and where the evaluation is done. Accordingly, we are planning that. This would have never happened. This would have been only practical in the sense, but this has we have to make compulsion because of the COVID. There are parts are also good with the post-COVID took place because students, faculty, everyone become more techno-savvy. They are become more technology involved. They are becoming more interaction. See, today we are getting all of us together. That is only because of that we are getting complete meeting online. Or this would have been, Deval sir would have been more better administrator. He is a very good, wonderful administrator. He knows that for every meeting you have to go to office, you have to go for arranging. Now the meetings they are taking online. And now you have to take care till the ultimate solution has to be found. Because just now Dr. Lalwani sir said there are chances of getting infections are also high. We have to take care of ourselves also, and we have to take care of the person who is next sitting to us also. Because we don't know who is going to be positive. Now we have to interacting with anybody, we have to see that the next one is positive. That only that unless we don't understand, it will be very difficult only. Now this has to be told to the every student of the college, those are working in the professional issue, like in BHMS, BAMS, dental, medical. And dental is very hard because they are directly exposed to the patient directly from the mouth where all these infections are occurring. So that all precaution measures, all this teaching program, we are planning. Now I have made that the university is ours, is the state university. We are now establishing a learning center, e-learning center totally, which will release to all faculty. So from coming batch, every student will be registered with their phone number and they will be accessible for their academic activity online from the university center. We will get the person as the faculty who is in Mumbai or in Pune, but that will be attached to our e-learning center as per the academic program wise. Because we have to take care from the August that nobody should miss the academic term of the student. Because it matters for their future, because every professional branch has been given a particular period for their academic term. Like medical has been given 4.5 plus internship, like that BMS is given 5 plus, like that dental. So we have to take care of this. And this all we have learned because of the COVID. And hope that the exchange of this all programs, webinars, then conferences online will make more easy for the UG student as well as the PG student to get acquainted with faculty, acquainted with the knowledge. And that will be at door, that will be. Only thing is that when actually these things will start, when the practicals will start, clinical examination in the ward will start. Because every student after second year, they have to go to see and evaluate the patients. What was happening in UK, because what we saw in the UK, that there was a teaching on a mannequins, because the patient don't allow you to consent to give you that you should check them. But now here the liberty is there, but now the chances of getting infections are there. We don't know what is going to happen to our students. Also, I have to look into that part also, because security of the student has also been looked for. So we too are also anxiously waiting for what should be the vaccine and what should be the treatment for the veteran. We are anxiously waiting. Yes, since now there are in almost 39 companies are in the race for getting vaccines since last almost 6 months. And just we are waiting anxiously which is going to come first. The same situation was with the swine flu also when I had work actually there. But swine flu was little bit, it was acceptable contagious. This is highly contagious, person to person. So this distancing and everything we'll have to take care. And for the students, we'll have to see that everything online teaching has to be evaluated. But the practical teaching we'll have to think twice, because mannequin teaching will not work, because India is giving the world-best doctor all over the country. That has been given, the data itself says on everywhere, because we have got a lot of this clinical material in India, and they are directly trained on the patient. So we are getting a lot of things. Just now, Dr. Lakdawala sir also said that about the patient and treatment, how much work he has done. Because these all things we'll have to put up in front of the all postgraduate, all undergraduates, all the students. Postgraduate students, they are already working on that. But what about the undergraduates? Because they should understand. Up till now, they were not ready to come to the hospital and to the colleges. But now they know that there is no other option left because we have to work with this. Because tomorrow they are going to the future faculty, future doctors for this, and they will have to treat with the patient. You don't know that time what will be the scenario. So that is what we are trying to see. It was a wonderful experience which has been arranged by the Nehru Science Center and Sheld sir. If any queries are there, I am ready to answer. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure there are quite a number of queries which are coming on the YouTube. My colleague who is actually looking at the YouTube will be addressing some of these questions. But since Maisekar sir talked about the vaccines, couple of companies, at least in India, for example, the Bharat Biotech from Hyderabad or the Serum Institute from Pune, Dr. Lakdawala or maybe Lalwani ji or any one of you can actually talk about this. How optimistically can we expect a vaccine candidate coming into the market, or because somehow there's a feeling that the numbers will come down only then the lockout should open. But that's not going to happen. It's highly contagious. The 5 lakhs perhaps will go to 6 lakhs, 7 lakhs. But if you really look at the way the recovery is taking place, 60% or so, nearing 60%. So how do we allay the fears of the public that yes, it is contagious, but with all the precautions that all of you actually talked about, it can be contained and we can still live with it and move on. Dr. Lakdawala, you can unmute, sir. Unmute.
Yeah. So I would like to say that, like what Dr. Lalwani said first, let's think of optimism first. 80 to 85% of the patients who are infected are probably asymptomatic to mildly symptomatic. That's the good thing about this disease. The other thing is that less than 2% of the patients need acute intensive care. Just because of our population, that we feel that the numbers of people needing acute care in such a short period of time, that's why you're finding a shortage of ICUs and everything. That's where the compounded problem is. As far as the vaccine goes, sometimes optimism far overruns what is actual fact. And that's what I believe about the vaccine.
I think you're muted. You can unmute.
Sorry. I think we far exceeded what we need to do. The vaccine, I think we will take a long while to find. Optimism sometimes beats what actual fact and reality is when it comes to a pandemic. The big problem is that a cure which looks like a cure, actually media, frontline media jumps onto the bandwagon way before medical jurisprudence has taken place. And suddenly we have a miracle drug or a miracle cure out there before medical personnel have actually looked at the data of anything. For example, the Lancet trial, a very reputed journal that put out HCQS studies out there, right? They've withdrawn it because they suddenly realized the folly or the futility, because it was funded by another group which had interest in something else. Now, normally this never happens as far as medical data goes, especially with all these reputed journals. So I believe that what is not ready for prime time is being put out there just because of the nature of the pandemic. Everyone's looking for a cure. Everyone's looking for a simple answer. Unfortunately, there aren't too many simple answers. The reality is we will have to learn how to deal with this virus. We will have to learn how to live with this virus. And the good part about it is 85% of our population might not even realize that they were ever infected.
Sonali?
Yeah. Yeah, so in fact, I think regarding the vaccine, like even if we are planning to come up with one and eventually when somebody does, by the time the clinical trials are over and by the time you get it in a saleable, marketable form, it's going to take time. And how many people are you going to vaccinate as well? And being a virus and knowing that it's mutated whenever it goes from organism to another, it's really far-fetched to think that that's going to be the only answer. So I think the key lies in what you said, that we have to go on with the optimism, that as long as we can prevent the mortality and manage the morbidity, I think that's the key to it.
There's one interesting question posed by Dr. A.P. Jayaraman. He says, how is the infrastructure for COVID-19 biomedical waste developed, as masks and PPEs will produce a huge surge of waste?
So, actual thing is that yes, that is quite a good question and quite a correct point. That is, for most epidemiologists to look at, because actually, because of the infective nature of this disease, even not even biomedical waste, even something like stool and urine are highly infected in some of these patients. So we'll have to take care of the excreta. We'll have to take care of how we dispose this stuff. We do understand that because of the infective nature, even the plates from which they eat. For example, in NSCI, we use the plastic plates, all right, for these guys from what they eat. Now we dispose that as well in biomedical waste, because that again can be infective. So we will have to treat everything that comes from their clothes to their utensils to everything as to be sanitized effectively and properly, and treat it like potentially biomedically labile substances. So we'll have to be very, very careful how we treat anything that comes out of these patients, especially the stools and anything else, blood products. We do know that when we are collecting some of these swabs, we are putting them in media which instantly kills the virus. So that might be a safe option. But everything else that comes out of the body of these patients, you'll have to be very, very careful.
There are quite a number of questions regarding the unemployment that is created and the people who have migrated from cities back to the villages. So how are that going to be addressed? And there are other people that they're talking about how many times one can use the masks, including the N95, how many times one can use this mask. So there's questions like this are there.
So in fact, sir, I think this is going to be, the socioeconomic perspective is completely going to change. So we'll have cleaner slums. People have a lot of low wage workers, or the migrant workers are not there now. So we'll have obviously higher wage local employment, which is going to be caused. It's going to cause a full change in the plethora of opportunities for the local people in Mumbai. And apart from that, even the environment perspective is very important, because on one side we've seen a drastic improvement in the air quality in the lockdown period, and there's been just tranquility all around, and noise pollution has been way less. And now we can't go back to a devastating stage where we were. So obviously there was thanks to overpopulation and other environmental degradation and pollution, we had all those effects add up to the pandemic as well. So now we'll have to go back to a new normal and possibly work in tandem with nature, so that there is some sort of an equilibrium. Because as Lakdawala sir also mentioned that regarding the solid waste management is going to be another issue, especially in urban areas, and all this is going to add up to the environment burden as well.
The question of it coming from China, the China virus or things like that. So this is another question people are talking about. Any one of you have anything to say about it?
Is there any debate as to where this virus has come from? I mean, I think it's pointless to debate that.
No, can we call it as a China virus? I mean, what Mr. Trump calls it.
Mr. Trump can call it whatever he feels like. The fact of the matter remains, it's come from China. So whatever but it's kind of, I think it's spread probably because I might upset quite a few people to say this, but a lot of governmental bodies, a lot of governmental heads have taken this too lightly. I think that's where we've gone wrong. We should have taken this much more seriously. We should have acted on this much, much more earlier. I think the Honorable Prime Minister of India shut down the country very, very early, in the very early phases. I think probably, though we are seeing large numbers coming out of India, I think we probably got a little bit time. Maybe we should have prepared a little bit faster and earlier during our time. And that's my advice. I was recently asked to probably go in and advise a little bit to the Delhi government because of our experience here in Mumbai. And my only advice is that when you see this happening in Mumbai, don't think and don't be fooled by thinking that it's not going to happen to you. It's going to come to everybody, sooner rather than later. So prepare yourself from now. Prepare the facilities that, like Mr. Deol said, that they've started preparing a lot of this. Maybe you might never need it, but you should never come to a stage where you've not been prepared and caught by surprise. Prepare your acute care units. Prepare everything today you'll never feel sorry for that. That much money, I think every government in the world can afford.
Oh, one Mr. Yuvraj Tandon has a question directly for Lakdawala sir. Why does the comorbid conditions have a higher impact towards this virus? I think,
Somehow this disease seems to have a dereliction for what I used to treat at one point of time, the obese people. The obese people mortality seems to be much higher. It's also not very fair to the older people. But like I said, we've discharged over 200 patients who were more than 60 years of age. We've discharged enough of diabetics, hypertensive. It's not a death knell. Remember that if you're diabetic, old, that does not mean it's the end and be all and end all of life if you get COVID-19. You can still survive. We've sent home a 2-day-old baby. We've sent home a 94-year-old man. Recently, I tweeted out some 280-plus-year-old gentlemen, and it became viral, the tweet, only because of the smiles on their faces. They stayed with us for close to 6 weeks, and they were really cute when they got discharged. I think the thing is, let's remain positive. Despite what happens with media is it just keeps posting numbers of positive patients and numbers of dead people, right? Let's talk about something different. Let's talk about the other aspects of the disease. How many people are going back and working? How many people are donating their plasma? How many people are going out and actually saving lives? I think let's talk about the positive things about this disease rather than just about the negative things.
Can I just add to this?
Yes, please.
As I started, even this will pass, because we will overcome this like we did the Spanish flu. If you go back into the history, 500 million people were affected by the Spanish flu. It took 2 years, but we got over it. Even this, we will get over it. I have no doubt about it. Only thing is we should take precaution, and the only way right now, the only arm that we have is our own immune system. Right now, there is no medication, as Dr. Lakdawala tells, there's nothing specific. There is no vaccine, because till a specific medicine comes out or till a specific vaccine comes out, there is no other prevention. The only way is to improve your immunity, keep healthy, try to stay away from an infected person, look after hygiene, hand hygiene, and social distancing and wearing masks. That is the only thing that can help you. That's what we do in our practices. That's what we do in our clinics. See that we are completely isolated from the patient by means of barriers, by means of respirators, masks, hazmat suits, so that though we are in such close proximity and contact with patients, we try to hold it through with physical barriers. Only unfortunate thing is, as Dr. Lakdawala was also saying, is that we are going to have a huge, massive problem about waste. Even waste of hazmat suits and plastics that we use, the amount that we use is going to cause an environmental disaster unless we have some way of having either something which can degrade, something which can disintegrate, some other way. See, that is going to be a huge problem going forward, because the amount of bio waste that is taking place it's huge.
Actually, based on two of your points, you said one, there is no cure as of now. One is you have to improve your immunity. There's Dr. Lakdawala also talked about the opportunity that people who are getting cured are giving their blood with the antibodies. So one of the gentlemen, I think Mr. Rahate, has a question. I've heard that antibodies produced in person's body can help us to fight against this deadly virus. Can you please explain this? I think you briefly touched about it, sir.
So there are two types of antibodies that we produce, right? One is the IgM and one is the IgG. The basic. There are other types of antibodies. I'm talking as basic as we can. The IgM is something that picks up in your body around the 8th day and will peak till the 14th day. All right. And the IgG is something that picks up around the 14th day in your body, and that shows past infection, and it will go on till maybe 28 days or maybe even longer, maybe 6 weeks. All right, and that gives you inherent protection for that period of time for that virus. Like Sonali very correctly said, if this virus duplicates or changes its form in some form, you might not get the same or added protection. And that's the fear sometimes that holds about the second wave coming and various other things. But for now, let's live with the positive news that once you get it, and I want to clear this myth. A lot of people live with this myth that once I've got it, after 15 days, I again tested positive. How is that possible? That is only because you've tested falsely negative. Okay, there's a very, very high proportion of false negativity, at least up to 30% with the current RT-PCR test that we have. So don't think that you got reinfected again. That's incorrect. You probably had one test which showed a false positive, and if you the infectivity rate, ICMR says that you can discharge after 10 days without even testing, right? Now, the reason they do that is because the infectivity rate of this virus drops down very, very rapidly. If for 3 days you do not have any symptoms like fever, cough, or whatever, so they say that the infectivity rate or the viral load you shed is very low. You can remain positive in your blood with an RT-PCR as high as up to 6 weeks sometimes because of the degraded RNA which is still present in your blood, which can give an RT-PCR positive. I think we don't need to worry too much about that.
There's one gentleman by name Creative Chris. He says, why does the virus affect some people more adversely while other people just show asymptomatic is there anything to do with the individual immune system? That's then gentleman by name Chris.
I just wanted to add to that, sir, exactly what sir is saying, that when we're talking about the contagion, it's the quantum of exposure and the viral exposure we're looking at. Now, in this sort of a situation, no one size fits all. In terms of the genetic susceptibility you have to acquire a disease, because you have something known as an innate immunity, which is already present at birth, and you have something which is called an acquired immunity. So what we are talking about, planned immunity building in the community now, is the acquired immunity or the planned immunity building. So there is no threshold as such. So it's not a stochastic effect that this amount of quantum is required, say in a fetus or in an infant or in a, say, pre-childhood person to cause the disease, and for the elderly. So when we don't know anything about the toxicity quantum, it's better to take a sort of a blanket precaution, which is what we are working on. So there are certain precautions which are generally to be taken for all, and of course in more measures for the vulnerable sections of society, that is the children below 10 years of age and the elderly above 60 years of age.
There's another question by name Sachin. He's asking, do we have a complete life cycle and genome sequence of the novel coronavirus?
I think we had that very early. In the first probably 2 weeks after the virus came out, we had that sequencing. And that's why probably, like Dr. Lalwani said, that when the Spanish flu took place, we didn't have that ability. Today we have that ability. But whether we've been any more intelligent of being able to find a vaccine, no.
There's another question again, I think Dr. Jayaraman, like the Spanish flu, which again reoccurred. First it came in and then it came back again sometime in September. Is it possible that the coronavirus also will have similar effect?
I think we need to be careful when we open up the world, because every city is peaking. Like, for example, we've opened up India, and my fear is that that's why different areas of India will peak at different points of time. From urban India, it will go into rural India, and that's my fear. But as far as the Spanish flu goes, I think if we go back to history and read about the Spanish flu or the Black Death or whatever it was called at that point of time, it actually was transmitted by healers, faith healers, because everyone went to a religious group and tried to get themselves healed, right? And there was mass congregations, and actually one healer gave it to another. It was almost, that's how this disease spread. And that was the reason for the second wave in the Spanish flu. I think we've become much more intelligent in 2020. And probably, unless we open up the world too soon, that might not happen.
So there's another gentleman who says that there are lots of things coming up in WhatsApp regarding improving one's immunity. Should we really believe what comes up in the social media?
So I think, sir, where immunity building is concerned, I think ideally even the Ayush Ministry and everybody is resorting now to traditional healing practices in terms of, the standard yoga, pranayam, lung health, the deep breathing exercises to increase the lung compliance, and, turmeric and the old gold standards. So when they're bringing all that, which is pretty harmless and easy to follow, which everybody should do, if possible, and it should be inculcated in early childhood as well for children to increase the immunity, because now they're going to go back to school with, say, masks and a different new normal. And when you look at sports, or you look at any other facility which we are going to utilize. So, well, immunity building in all age groups is going to be by the same process. So I don't think, and of course, antioxidants play a major role. So vitamins A, C, and D, of course, have a major role in COVID-related research, and zinc. So yes, but I think a balanced diet and regular exercise, and of course, a lot of deep breathing and lung exercises should really help everybody generally. And a good sleep, that is immunity.
I think we'll take only one more question, this last question perhaps. Anjali Sethi, she's asking, people keep talking about the herd immunity. What are the chances of Indian population getting the herd immunity, and when? Any of the doctors, Dr. Lalwani ji or Lakdawala ji, any one of you? The possibilities of Indian population getting the herd immunity, and when?
See, one gets herd immunity when 60 to 80% of the population gets the virus. Let's hope that we don't get such a large number. For a country of 1.2 billion people. Getting herd immunity means you're going to have at least 80 crore people being positive, which our medical system will not be able to handle. We will collapse. Okay, your mortality will go up tremendously. So expecting herd immunity is something which I think is going to be a little far-fetched, because if you're talking of 60 to 80% of the population being COVID positive. What do you say, Dr. Lakdawala?
So my best case scenario and worst case scenario. Best case scenario is that this virus mutates into a very, very benign form and we all get saved. We have it, but we don't really die out of it. And worst case scenario is this virus gets into a really vicious form and mutates into that form. And then we really need to be careful. That's probably what I can say. Herd immunity would happen more in slums and pockets like that, where there are commonly shared bathrooms and stuff like that. Your only hope is that you get exposed to tiny amounts of this virus at various points of time and develop that kind of immunity. I've been for 3 months on the forefront. I've checked my IgG twice and I've still not developed it. So I can tell you I have not developed herd immunity so far after being around at least 2,000 plus positive, frankly positive and proven positive patients. So I don't know what to say.
I think, thank you so much, sir. I mean, it's almost about, we have gone beyond the schedule now. All of you have spared your valuable time. I would like to thank each one of you, Dr. Dilip Maisekar, sir, the Vice Chancellor. We have Dr. Mahesh Lalwani ji, Dr. Lakdawala ji, Ranjit Singh Deol ji, Dr. Sunil Khanna. Each one of you, thank you so very much for sparing your valuable time to not only to speak to our audience, but also take quite a lot of questions. I think to sum it up, what we can say is we will have to live with it, and maybe this day also will pass, like Dr. Lalwani said. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, sir.